On today's show, we are interviewing the living legend, New York Times best-selling author, and nationally renowned psychologist, Daniel Goleman. Daniel Goleman has sold over 5 million copies of his book, Emotional Intelligence, which has now been printed in over 40 languages. The Harvard Business Review called Emotional Intelligence, which discounts IQ as the sole measure of one's abilities, as revolutionary, a paradigm-shattering idea, and chose Daniel Goleman's article, What Makes a Leader, as one of the 10 must-read articles from its pages. Emotional Intelligence was named one of the 25 most influential business management books by Time magazine. The Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, and Accenture Institute for Strategic Change has listed Goleman among the most influential business thinkers. Goleman's work as a science journalist has been recognized with countless awards, including the Washburn Award for Science Journalism, a Lifetime Career Award from the American Psychological Association. And he was made a Fellow of the American Association for the Advancement of Science in recognition of his communicating science to the general public. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a huge fan, and without any further ado, I introduce you to the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Daniel Goleman.
Some shows don't need a celebrity narrator to introduce the show, but this show does. 2 men, 8 kids, co-created by 2 different women, 13 multi-million-dollar businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Thrivetime Show.
3, 2, 1, here we go!
Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, and we'll show you how to get here. Started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now we'll show you how to.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. And Dr. Z, on today's show, we have a world-renowned special guest. We have the internationally recognized psychologist, the New York Times best-selling author of Emotional Intelligence, a man who I quote on this show so often. His book, called Emotional Intelligence, was named by Time magazine as one of the 25 most influential business management books. Mr. Daniel Goleman, how are you, sir?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Clay. Thank you.
Daniel, I want to deep dive into this emotional intelligence, into this book that I read so many years ago that blew my mind. Could you introduce the listeners out there who are not familiar with the concept of emotional intelligence, what this means, what this concept is all about?
Sure. Well, we all know about emotional intelligence because it's people skills. It's how you manage yourself, how you handle your relationships. It's that simple. However, you never heard about it when you're in school. They teach something very different.
Right. And how does school teach about emotional intelligence differently than how you teach about it?
Well, first of all, most schools don't teach emotional intelligence. They teach academic subjects. You learn emotional intelligence in life, and you learn it kind of, idiosyncratically. I divide it down into these 4 domains: self-awareness, self-management. That's how you handle yourself. Then empathy and relationship skills. That's how you handle your relationships. Under each of those 4 parts, I have 12 competencies that companies themselves have determined to identify their high performers. And each of them is based in a different aspect of emotional intelligence.
Daniel, there's a lot of, and Dr. Z, this is going to sound like a backhanded compliment for you.
Oh, it is?
But there are a lot of optometrists in Tulsa that one could argue know more about the human eye than you, or about the same. But you are probably the best-selling optometrist in Oklahoma, or one of the top selling optometrists in Oklahoma. And Daniel, you wrote in your book, Emotional Intelligence, that essentially, no matter how intelligent you are, if you can't emotionally connect with your employees, if you can't emotionally connect with other people, they're just not going to stay engaged. Can you share with most business owners out there where by default most people are getting it wrong as it comes to emotional intelligence?
Well, the basic mistake that's made is you put your goal before the connection, when in fact it should be the other way around. It doesn't matter if you have what your business is. First of all, you want to connect with the people you're working with who work for you, and then you want to connect with your clients and your customers. And it's not just about, okay, here's your glasses. It's about how you're doing today, empathizing with them, what's going on, how can I help you? People want to hear that. How can I help you? And they want to feel like you actually care how you can help them. There's research that shows that the very best salespeople don't just try to make a sale. They try to nurture the relationship, because that's repeat business. And I think that's all about putting the relationship first, and then everything else follows.
There was a specific line in Emotional Intelligence that really did blow my mind. And so I'm going to, a specific portion of the book, so I'm going to read it to you. And I'd like for you to kind of break it down line by line for us. You wrote here,
Sure.
If your emotional abilities aren't in hand, if you don't have self-awareness, if you're not able to manage your distressing emotions, if you can't have empathy and have effective relationships, then no matter how smart you are, you're not going to get very far. I read that during a time of my life where I was very good at the particular skill, Mr. Daniel, of DJing. I was a disc jockey. I started what became the largest wedding entertainment company in America, but I was all alone. It was just me and my awesome DJ-ness, my great skill, and I couldn't ever build a team of people because I struggled to manage my distressing emotions. When I read that line, I realized, oh man, I am struggling in this area. Can you coach our listeners and kind of break down what the average distressing emotions that are experienced by most people are?
Well, basically, let me back up. What you're saying is what got you here won't get you there. The things that you may be good at, like, oh, I'm the greatest DJ. I'm the wedding DJ.
Yeah.
However, somehow I can't keep people together as a team. What that says, that's such a common problem, and it does speak to handling your emotional abilities, managing your distressing emotions particularly, and then empathizing. So let me break it down. First of all, knowing what you're feeling and how it's impacting your performance. That takes self-awareness. You want to kind of monitor yourself, want to know what's going on, and is it good, is it bad? The second thing is if you're having, a distressing emotion, you're like really angry or really anxious, those are the most common distressing ones, what can you do about it? Can you handle it? Can you recover from it? Resilience is defined as how quickly you recover from the peak of that upsetting emotion to being able to be calm and clear. And that's where you do things best from. So that's the second part. Then there's empathy. Empathy is critical to teams, to sales, to dealing with people. It's knowing what the other person is feeling, and then that determines what you do. So if you don't know what they're feeling, if you're really tuned out, you're going to be off. And if you're off, people really don't want to have much to do with you. They certainly won't want to be on your team, and they may not come back, as repeat business. So empathy, I think, is really key. But you can't empathize if you don't handle your distressing emotions, because the nature of being upset is that it fixates your attention on what's upsetting you. You're not empathizing with the other person. You're trying to fix yourself.
Z, I want to share a story out there with Daniel. I want Daniel to see if he can kind of coach me through it, to see if I did it right. We actually had a member of our team, who used to work for us over 4 years ago. And then nefariously, while still being employed by us, they started a company to compete directly with us, a.k.a. violating their non-compete agreement and trying to steal customers from us to build up their own business. Well, since that person left our company, they have failed to pay their taxes and have failed to have their wages garnished for the last 4 years. They owe a ton of child support. So apparently when talking to a member of the government or the IRS or their attorney or whoever is after them chasing their wages, their garnished wages that they have not reported over the past 4 years, they claimed that they were still employed by us as of today. They actually claim that they still work for us, even though they don't. And it's so easy to prove they don't work for us because there's a myriad of reasons that it's easy to prove they don't work for us. They just simply have not worked for us at all for nearly Well, it's getting closer to 5 years. It's obviously provable whether somebody's employed or not. But the point is, I have to fill out all this paperwork. I had to get it notarized today. I had to go up to the Cityplex Towers to sign stuff. And it made me mad for about 60 seconds. But it used to make me mad for about 6 weeks. Daniel, how long should these kinds of things, because I took time out of my schedule to drop what I'm doing to go notarize something, to prove something that I knew was true, and it's just a hassle, and I had to pay an attorney $500 to thank him but I got a tour of the facility. That was nice.
That's nice.
So how long should someone stay mad if they get upset about this? Should it take 60 seconds?
Well, first of all, I want to appreciate your learning curve. If you're going from 6 weeks to 60 seconds, that's really great. Can you go from 60 seconds to 2 seconds?
It's taken me so long, and the whole way I was going over to the Cityplex Tower. I'm in the car going, baby steps. Baby steps. I mean, what about Bob all over again?
The world champs at this would flip it around, and they'd say, this is so amusing that I have to do this at all. It's ridiculous. And they would laugh at it. So, that's like the ultimate goal for handling upsetting emotions is not being upset at all. That's a very hard one. I think if you're doing 60 seconds, that is pretty darn good.
I honestly did not stay mad. Immediately, I was like, that's crazy. I think, Marshall, you were aware of the situation.
Oh, yeah.
I'm good. Are you kidding me? What in the world? And then I'm like, baby steps. Gonna go see my attorney. Okay.
Well, good. I want to point out two things you just said you did. First of all, you stepped back. You went from the basement to the balcony, as we say. The basement is, you're caught up in the emotion and, my God, you're so upset. And the balcony, you're kind of seeing it. And then not only do you see it, but you see that you can change it. That's fantastic. And anybody can do that, but it takes work to keep practicing.
Now, here's what I used to do, though. I used to get madsy for 6 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
And then I had no empathy during those 6 weeks. Because I was just mad at everything, right?
Sure.
So then I put off this negative
skulk.
And that's when I first met you, Dr. Zoo. My wife worked for you.
You were a really good skulker.
I was scowling. I'd been mad for 18 consecutive years. For empathy, for the listeners out there who are hard-charging alpha entrepreneurs, most of our listeners are business owners or want to be. How should we show empathy more effectively? Where are most people getting it wrong? Walk us through empathy.
There are three kinds of empathy. First is cognitive empathy. You know how that person sees things, how they think about it, how they perceive the language, the terms they use. That means you can be a very effective communicator with them because you can put things in terms they'll understand. The second kind is emotional empathy. You need this too. This is knowing what that person is feeling, not getting consumed by, they're really upset, you get upset, but rather knowing that, you're being on, they cracked up at your joke, or they're really mad about something, but you know that. And then the third thing, third kind of empathy is called empathic concern, that you actually care. Making the person, this is really important, making your employee or your customer or your client feel that you care about them. That's where people really feel empathized with. And I think in terms of a business, that's where you want to be. That's what you want to project to people. That, I get you. I know it's upsetting you. I know what you like about this. I'm little talking language you understand. And you know what? I'm going to help you out.
Z, you have worked with so many doctors. People in your peer group are very, very successful. And doctors, lawyers, professionals, people who've done well in life, it's easy to come across as condescending or to talk down to people. I see it a lot with a lot of attorneys I've worked with over the years. They don't mean to. They just kind of talk down to people. How have you, Z, learned to be more empathetic for your patients when you started out as a young doctor? Because you're a master at that. You always, you sincerely do care. But how did you learn that? Did you have to read Daniel's book here 47 times, or what did you have to do?
It was actually 48.
Oh, nice.
I think that the main thing is communication and listening, really being attentive, and then connecting. Just like you said, it's all about the connection with the patient. And I think listening and then answering their questions accurately and not in a. I try to talk like I'm talking to someone. Like a third grader. Tried to explain it
like
as
me.
Simple. Yeah, like I picture clay in the chair, and then I speak very slowly with good pronunciation and small words.
Drawing a lot of pictures.
No, I don't treat them like that. But I think the main thing for me is in the connection and the EQ part is, and I think you Daniel, I'd like to get your take on this, is people not listening. people not paying attention.
Oh my God. Poor listening is the common cold of business today. I think, first of all, people are more distracted than ever. They have more incoming texts and calls and thises and that's. And it's very hard to pay full attention to the person in front of you, which is where empathy begins. If you can't do that, then you don't have it. It kills it right from the start. So you want to give the person full attention and then take in, and then you'll spontaneously know what to do.
Now, not paying attention to the person in front of you is something that I see a lot because of the smartphone, which I think we could more accurately name the dumb phone. Can you talk to me, Daniel, about how a smartphone that's being used to communicate with someone who's not in front of you can really kill communication? When couples are out to dinner and they're each having a separate conversation, people are in meetings, each of them are on their smartphone kind of weaseling away text messages during the meeting. How can that just kill the rapport?
Well, it's so funny that in Silicon Valley, they outlaw phones in meetings. You have to leave them outside the door. Right. Because they know that you may as well not be there if you're texting or checking your phone under the table, because you're not paying full attention. Full attention is a priceless commodity these days. I was out to dinner with my wife at one of these nice fancy restaurants, white tablecloths, candles, and the couple next to us, they're not looking in each other's eyes, which is taking advantage of the opportunity. They're both looking at their phone. There was an article 10 years ago when there was a major magazine called Time magazine. It said there's a new word in the English language. It's pizzle. It's a combination of puzzled and pissed off. And it's how you feel when the person next to you takes out their phone and starts talking to someone else. Only 10 years ago, this was violating a norm, a social rule. Like you pay attention to the person you're with. Now things have shifted. People talk on their phone, all the time. So poor listening has become epidemic. And not only that, I think we need to be mindful. We need to notice that this is happening and change what we're doing. Pay full attention. It sounds simple, not as simple as it used to be.
How much of communication do you feel like is body language? I've read so many things about that. 80%, 20%, and so listening is one thing, but also watching how they're saying it and really listening to how they're saying it and their body language while they're saying it. What do you give more? Do you give more to what they're saying or their body language that they're saying?
I wouldn't give it a fixed percentage, but I say this: the lack of your ability to see the body language of the other person, which you don't have online when you're texting or emailing, is a big loss. The reason that we have what's called flaming, where people get really upset and they'll type something and send it, and then they'll regret it later. That's a emotional hijack. And the reason we have it is in face-to-face interactions, your brain registers instantaneously, like hundreds of thousands of cues. And you register what's going on with the other person, and you fine-tune what you do accordingly. Online, you don't have it. You not only don't have the physical cues, you don't have the tone of voice if it's just text.
Right.
And tone of voice carries a lot of emotional information. So you're really navigating blind, but what it does in the brain is allow the emotional centers to take over, because they don't get any what are called inhibitory signals telling you, oh, don't say that, don't do that. And so you do say that, and you do that, and then you regret it.
Pizzle, the phrase that pays. Pizzle, again, it's a combination of, you said puzzled and pissed off. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and I just want to make sure that we all know what he's talking about. We've all been to the mall. Recently, I was at Target, and I watched a young man walk right into the door. Because there's doors automatically open.
Oh, yeah.
And he just walked straight into a non-door. And I watched that face of because he was texting or whatever he was doing.
Can't stand it.
I watch people drive like that. I watch people drive their meetings like that, drive their company like that. I watch people, and you just said there are companies, Daniel, in Silicon Valley that ban smartphones from their meetings. Did you just say
I heard a guy, actually, one of the people who developed for Apple the first iPhone, he said, we were all 20-somethings, we were single, we were staying up all night and stuff. We didn't care. We tried to make it as seductive as possible. He said, now I have 2 kids and I really regret it. Think about that.
Yeah, famous last word, sure.
Well, I was going to say, I know a lot of people that come from the Silicon Valley area that have talked about that. A lot of people who've made these devices, like the Facebook apps, and to help develop these things. We had a guy named Nir Eyal on the show, Nir Eyal, who wrote a book called Hooked, and he talked about how a lot of these people that have helped develop these apps, they've actually turned the push notifications off of their own phones. The apps that they've developed.
There's more than that, Clay. They won't let their kids have phones till they're like teenagers.
Right, because it wrecks your brain.
Totally, yeah. Well, what it does is the reason I worry about it actually is because emotional intelligence, the brain is designed to learn it in life by paying attention to other people. And the more screen time kids have, the less they're paying attention to people around them. It's a problem.
I am very worried about it as well, and I'm glad that you used the word worry. I want to ask you this, though. You have written that in a very real sense, we have two minds. One that thinks and one that feels. Could you break down what you mean by that?
Well, the part of the mind that thinks is the executive center. Technically, it's a prefrontal cortex, top of the brain in the forehead. And this is the part of the brain that takes in information, understands it deeply, responds agilely. It comprehends, it learns. Then there's the emotional center deep in the brain, which actually is more powerful. It was the brain was designed as a survival tool, and emotions are the brain's way of making us pay attention. This is important, and driving us to do something. And the emotional centers can take over the rational centers. Those are two different minds, and they run us in two different ways. There's a fabulous book by a guy named Danny Goleman, Thinking Fast and Slow, and he documents just up and down the difference. For one thing, the emotional centers are much faster, but much more sloppy than the rational centers. The rational centers in brain time are slower. And so our first impulse is the emotional impulse. But if you stop and think about it for a minute, then you let the other brain, the more rational brain, the part of the brain that takes in more information, make the decision. You're going to be smarter.
What if there's somebody out there listening right now who's doing some self-awareness, some soul searching, and they're saying, I really am terrible with my emotional intelligence. People think that I hate them, dislike them, that I'm always
hothead.
That I always come across as angry. Whenever I say something, people don't seem to get it. I'm now 30, I'm 25, however old I am, I'm 45.
Sure.
And I recognize that through circumstance, a lot of people I see second-generation business owners where their parents helped put them in charge of something or they inherited something, and all of a sudden they're in charge. Maybe they were good at a skill and they got promoted because they're good at a skill, and now all of a sudden they realize, I might be the worst communicator on the planet. I might have the least high level of emotional intelligence ever. What can someone do? What are the steps that someone needs to take if they are self-aware and they know they need to get better in this area?
Well, for one thing, most everyone can stand to get a little better in some area of emotional intelligence. I have 5 basic steps. The first is ask yourself, do I really care? Because it's going to take a little work, a little effort over some time. And if you don't really care, you can stop right there. Second, maybe you stop right there. But if you go on, another thing that helps a lot is to get a thorough assessment. As I said, emotional intelligence is not one thing like an IQ score. There's 12 different competencies. They range from self-awareness and managing your emotions and having a positive outlook to empathy to being able to be influential and persuade people or a good team member. I mean, each of those is a different skill set. And by the way, they've been identified by dozens and hundreds of companies as what set their star performers aside. So we have an assessment. It's called the Emotional Social Competence Inventory. It's a 360 where you pick people who you trust, whose opinions you value, and ask them to rate you anonymously. This is very important because you won't know what they said, so they can be totally frank. You get the data. You ask maybe 8 or 10 people. You get the data as an average. That gives you a map. I have a profile. I'm not so good at empathy. I could be a better listener. I could manage my emotions better, whatever it is. That's where you want to work. Then get some support. I've started an emotional intelligence coaching network because I don't really think that a lot of the stuff out there that's called emotional intelligence is where I'd like to be. We're training coaches to look at the whole profile of someone's emotional intelligence and then hone in on where that person could develop. And it's different for everybody. You might need, help handling your emotions, or you might need help tuning into someone else's emotions, or being a team member, or running a team, whatever it might be. So they identify that. And by the way, if your listeners want to be coached, they can go to KeyStep Media/coach and say, hey, I want to be coached. We've got coaches waiting to coach. And then the other thing you have to do, and the coach will help you, is identify a particular behavior that you could practice. Like when someone comes into my office or comes up to me, I'm going to stop what I'm doing, put it aside, stop my ruminations, pay full attention to the person in front of me. Now, it may sound easy, but you know what? If you practice being a poor listener thousands of times, that's the brain's default. That's what you do automatically. So you have to stop yourself, realize this is the moment I'm going to pay full attention. Do it, and the coach will help you. Coach will support you in that. And then you have to practice at every naturally occurring opportunity. And by the way, not just at the office, not just at the business, could be with your teenagers, could be with your spouse. And the brain doesn't make a distinction between home and work, but the more you practice, the stronger the circuits for the new behavior become. And then finally, it becomes automatic. That means there's a neural landmark. You can do that the right way from now on.
Daniel, I want to mine into some details here, some specific scenarios that would happen to me all the time. And Dr. Z, I'm sure you can relate to this as well.
You bet.
Daniel, at the peak of the company DJ Connection, before I sold it, we were doing about 80 wedding receptions per weekend. It's about 4,000 events, right? And every wedding was somebody's, big day. And Marshall, you know this because you were one of the DJs back in the day. This is years ago. Some guys would go out to the wedding and not care about doing a good job. They would give you lip service, like, I'm going to do a good job. We get the surveys back. And Daniel, if we did 80 weddings, we'd probably get one or two keyboard warrior complaints about, they would say, I was not happy with the service. So about 4%, 5% of people were not happy. And probably 95% of the customers were happy. That was kind of the best I ever got it to be. And I would get so frustrated, Daniel, with these people. I'm like, how could you possibly go to someone's wedding and not care enough to show up on time and to do a good job? So I would be mad on Monday, because the weddings were on Saturday. I'd read the surveys on a Sunday. Sure. I would come to work on Monday and I'd be mad. But you wrote, emotions are contagious, Clay. We've all known it experientially. After you have a really fun coffee with a friend, you feel good. When you have a rude DJ boss in an office meeting, Clay, people walk away feeling bad. And so I'm like, wow, he wrote that specifically for me. I really did, though, I would just project that on my team. And I didn't stop doing that until I was probably 25, 26. I'm 38 now. Could you coach a younger me, the person that would read those complaints from a bride where she's detailing how upset she was and how rude the DJ was? And how do you not project that on the team when you sincerely are frustrated?
Yeah, but first of all, I think it's helpful for you to make the distinction between the person who frustrated you and you need to deal with them. You need to give them like you really blew it. And maybe, you get one more chance or two more chance, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But you need to be strong with that person and then stop right there. Because when you go in with your team, who, by the way, weren't that person, right?
Right.
They did well. Then you want to switch. You want to manage your own emotional state, because emotions are powerfully contagious from the leader outward.
Right.
I mean, the data on that is unbelievable. If a leader of a team is in a positive mood, people on the team catch that mood. Emotions are contagious. Right. And by the way, their performance goes up. If the leader is in a down mood, Clay, people catch that mood, performance goes down. So, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you go in to your team meeting and bring that other, unpleasant feeling that you had with that person that blew it. You want to leave that behind. You want to be able to manage your own emotions, go in and actually energize people. Be the upbeat, be the enthusiastic boss that people love, that also energizes the team. And yes, a coach could help you do that because it's something you can practice.
Dr. Z, you are so good at being the Dr. Zellner Industries hype man.
Well, you know,
I mean that, though, with the bank, with the optometry clinic, with the auto auction, with A to Z Medical, with the durable medical company, with all the things you're involved in. No, seriously, there's multiple companies. There's probably a fire at one of those brands. There's never a day where everything is going well, right? I mean, there's always a fire at one of them, right?
I pray for that day.
Seriously, though, right? I mean, you own a lot of real estate. There's probably never a day where there's not a problem with something.
Correct.
So how have you learned to implement what Daniel teaches? How have you learned?
It's a decision. It's a choice you make every morning you wake up. We all have a reason to be upset. We all have a reason to be in a bad mood.
I've made a list right now.
I mean, let's face it, we all do. And just choosing joy over everything else and understanding that all those things are fixable and they will get fixed, and you just got to you just got to be purposeful in fixing them. That's you don't ignore them.
Right.
Stick your head in the sand and go, well, that toilet will stop running, I'm sure, eventually. Or that leak will stop eventually, or that person who's stealing money from me, I'm sure they'll get enough, and then they'll stop doing it.
Okay, so Daniel, you and Z are both very good at this. You have a notable quotable, Daniel, where you said, scheduling downtime as part of your routine is hard but worth it, personally, even professionally. This has been and continues to be the hardest thing for me to implement. Because whenever I have downtime, Daniel, I'll go to the beach with my wife, and I'll stand there looking into the ocean and waiting to come back home.
With a 30-degree sunburn.
Downtime, it's very interesting because it's not just being at the beach. Where is your mind, Clay? It's back in the office, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so actually, downtime has to do with what's happening mentally and emotionally in you. And you want to be able to have some time in your day, in your week, when you recover from all of the stuff that's stressing you out. Because as you point out, life is full of stress. And the body is designed to have an emergency episode. We call it stress today. It's a biological reality in the body. And stress hormones are flooding through and so on. And then it's designed to have a recovery. And today, modern life, we just don't give ourselves that recovery time. But I say recovery needs to be not just, well, you went to the beach, because that could be as stressful depending on what you're thinking about.
I've discovered that beaches freak me out.
So the better thing, I think, is to have something you can do, yoga, or take your dog for a walk, and be present in that moment, or mindfulness. Mindfulness is getting very popular in the business world today. It's a way of bringing your attention to something neutral, like your breath. And then when your mind goes to that thing that's upsetting you and you notice it, you bring it back to the breath. And what that does is strengthen the muscle of letting go of what's upsetting you and going back to something neutral, or as Dr. Z said, joy. Why not be happy? But something that is different than that thing that you find so stressful. And doing it, remember I talked about practice. Practice actually changes the brain. So the more you can practice that, for example, some people, I've been working with different groups of business people lately who are showing them how to do this simple breath focus, which takes your mind off the stuff that's upsetting you. And the more you do it, if you do it every day, and a lot of them do it, find 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it may be, the more you do it, the stronger that mental muscle gets.
That's a fantastic word, Daniel. I tell you what, so many people talk to me about getting something in their mind and not being able to get away from it. Having that thing just torture their mind, and they can't sleep, or they wake up in the middle of the night and they can't go back to sleep, and they just stress over it. They just think about it, and they can't get away from it. So that is a wonderful, beautiful story or technique on how to start that process of getting the brain to it stronger and stronger and stronger to get away from those thoughts.
It's a super move. It's a super move.
It is a super move, and it's amazing how many people out there suffer from that.
Okay.
Well, it's not the events; it's how you process the mental.
Yeah,
that's the difference, and you want to give yourself a way of letting go, dropping it, and just being in a better space.
Right.
Now, I want to educate the listeners about one move, Daniel, that you've written about that I stole from you. And I want to just get that out there. I want to apologize. Thank you. Apologize.
You're welcome to it, Clay, whatever it is. What is it?
Yeah, well, I'd read where you said every morning you go off to a small studio behind your house and you try to ignore all email and phone calls until lunchtime. Then I launch into the sometimes frantic busyness of a tightly scheduled day. That was the routine you had. So I kind of reversed it where, I go to work every day, and basically around 1 o'clock most days I come back here and I do the show prep and I record the podcast and I do my editing and I keep my phone off. And it is it's really,
a beautiful thing.
It's helped me to stay energized and focused. How long did it take you, Daniel, to develop this routine that works for you?
Well, I came upon it when I had book contracts that impelled me to deliver on time. And also, for many years I worked at the New York Times. And so I was doing articles on deadline. And that means you have to have the capacity to tune out everything else. You can't, watch your phone for, every little text or stuff. You have to give yourself, it's called cocoon time sometimes. It's a protected time and place where you can be productive and you ignore phone calls. You don't look at email. You block out the outside world. I think it's essential these days to get things done because if you're frantic all the time, if you're in meetings, if you're talking to people, you never do those things that are most important for you.
True.
So I learned early on that I found that I could take a morning. I worked at home, and who knew? I was up in the studio up the hill behind my house, no phone, no email. And by the way, it was the most productive time. Then I'd go and do everything else.
I heard you talk about this, and I saw the notable quotable that you had where you wrote, "We need to recreate boundaries. When you carry a digital gadget that creates a virtual link to the office, you need to create a virtual boundary that did not exist before." Could you, for somebody out there who's going, but you don't understand, I need to keep my phone on all the time. You don't understand. I need to, but you don't get it. In my scenario, I need to. So they're going to their kids' events, they're going to cheerleading events, soccer events, they're going to camps, they're going to things, and they just never are, they're never mentally and physically present at the same time because they're never turning their phone off. What advice would you have for somebody out there who is struggling to create boundaries?
First of all, it helps to realize there used to be a boundary between work and life. This is like the old days, ancient times, pre-digital, but those two things were separate. They're two separate domains. If you want to be there for your kids, you can't also be there for your office. So what we need to do now is become conscious of something that used to happen automatically and to set the boundaries like, okay, I'm going to be at my kid's softball game or soccer game the next hour and, have a message. I'll get back to you in 2 hours. And people will have to live with that.
But what if I upset somebody, Daniel? Someone's saying, what if I upset somebody?
It's your question. What's more important? Loving your kid and letting your kid know that you're there for him or her, or having someone be upset. What upset is simply their first reaction to a new reality they have to learn. And the new reality is that, hey, you're taking some time for yourself. You're setting some boundaries. Get used to it. I'll get back to you. I'm not forgoing my responsibility. I'm going to be the same person I was. I'm just going to be it on my timetable, not yours.
Daniel, I would love to get your reaction to a Naval Ravikant quote. Naval Ravikant, the famous Silicon Valley investor behind Twitter, Facebook, and other very successful companies. He said, "I don't think modern science has good answers here. I think that the modern world is actually really bad. The modern world is full of distractions. Things like Twitter and Facebook are not making you happy. They're making you unhappy. You are essentially playing a game that's created by the creators of those systems. And yes, it can be a useful tool once in a blue moon, but you're engaging in dispute, resentment, comparison, jealousy, anger about things that frankly just don't matter." Now, this is a guy who invested in Stack Overflow. He's invested in Twitter. He's invested in Uber. He invested in these things, and now he's sort of looking back at it going, could you please explain the dangers of being constantly connected to social media?
Yeah, this is like the guy who helped develop the iPhone and now regrets it
There we
because he
go.
has kids. So, they're great money machines, and they operate by activating pleasure centers in the brain, and people actually get addicted to them. And so that's like why he would invest. On the other hand, you might have some remorse because the data shows that the more time people spend on digital devices, the less happy they become, particularly if they're just roaming, if they're just searching for something or just reading feeds that come into them rather than like listening to your podcast, something that they choose. So the unhappiness that people create online has an antidote, and that is getting offline and doing something you enjoy.
There you go. Come on.
Now, okay, here we go. Paul Graham. I'm sure you're familiar with Paul Graham. He's one of he's the co-founder of Y Combinator, but he's the mastermind behind Airbnb, Dropbox, and Reddit. He sent out a tweet that blew people's minds that said simply, "I never carry an iPhone." And he went on to explain through further interviews that here's a guy who invented the first shopping cart ever purchased by Yahoo called Via Web. You could buy Via Web. He developed he developed online shopping. Then he developed online home rentals with Airbnb. Then he developed Dropbox, online file sharing, but he never engages with an iPhone. Can you explain how that's possible? Someone out there has to say, how is that possible? How can a guy who's developing these things that everyone on an iPhone uses not engage on them? It just seems like a counterintuitive idea. Somebody out there is on the verge of getting it, Daniel. Preach the good news.
He sounds like a very smart man to me because he understands that on the one hand, while he can make money from these things, and why not, he also doesn't have to be a slave to them. He doesn't have to be someone like so many of us who are constantly checking our phones for texts, for email, for calls, and so on. And he's setting a boundary which says, I'll communicate with you when I want. And, I'll get your communication when I want. In other words, he's taking control, and control itself is something that gives people a sense of deep satisfaction and security. So, I applaud the guy.
Z, I've seen you say this to somebody, and I would like for you to educate the listeners of how to do this. I've seen you in a meeting where somebody said, "Hey, I sent you a text and you didn't respond." And I've seen Z explain in a very direct, I think it was a kind way. But you
good.
You did. You explained to somebody who was in. They said, "Hey, I sent you a text and you never responded." And you said to this week, can you kind of summarize the kind of thing you would say to somebody when they said, "I sent you a text and you did not respond"? Could you kind of summarize how you clarify that idea?
Well, the thing about it is that I don't, always, have my phone. I'm not always, when people ding or whatever, I'm not a slave to my phone. Trying not to be a slave to my phone. Number two, non-texting back is communicating. By the way. Number three, sometimes I don't want to get into a texting conversation with someone at that point. So I'm going to choose when I want to talk with them. So it's like, hey, it wasn't urgent for me. I didn't see an urgency in it. I'm not going to text you back unless it's, I see that it's something urgent. And by me not texting you that, let you know that. So, if it's something I think we need to deep dive or talk about, I'll bring it up. If not, it's it's kind of a dead issue to me. So,
Daniel, I want to get your take on flow state versus the frazzle state.
Ooh,
Frazzle is when you're constantly upset, you never recover. Stress after stress after stress. We talked about that. Flow is the exact opposite. It's when you perform at your best, and in fact, people are oddly relaxed. The brain is less active in flow than it is when it's stressed. And the reason is that you're doing so well and you're doing it so easily, it just flows through you. So when you ask people, tell me about a time when you outdid yourself, even you were surprised by your performance, they're describing not only what exactly they did, but also what their inner state was. And the inner state is always the same. It's what we call flow. And by the way, flow is pleasurable.
Psychology, if you're looking at the definition, psychologists such as yourself and other leading experts have described flow state as essentially being in a mental state of operation in which a person performing an activity is fully immersed in a feeling of energized, focused, or involvement.
Sure.
They're just totally lost. They lose lose the ability to almost keep track of time and space. And that's how I feel when I'm working on the podcast or writing a book or working on a workflow for one of our companies. So my wife will come downstairs to check on me, and I'm so immersed in enjoying the reading of a good book that I just lost track of time. I just lose track of time.
Yeah, that's a flow state. We get into flow. It doesn't have to be a big thing. You get into what are called microflows. Anytime you pay full attention and immerse yourself in what's going on and lose track of everything else, that's actually good because you're being fully engaged in that thing. It could be being with another person, could be a book, could be a movie, could be anything, could be a hobby. But it's intrinsically pleasurable, as we in psychology say. You feel really good. And it goes with this full focus.
Marshall, you played basketball in college as well as professionally. And you would get in a flow state where you would hit many three-pointers in a row. To quote-unquote, to be technical, you're on fire.
Oh, nice.
Right, you're on fire. And so you're hitting a lot of three-pointers. Things are going well for you. All 6'8" of you. The 6'8" of great is all dedicated towards a common purpose of hitting the three. You don't even the heckler. You don't notice him. The fans. You don't notice them. You're in that flow state.
Right.
As a business coach, I believe you're in that flow state most of the time. You coach business owners that sometimes are never in a flow state because they're in a constant state of frazzle. What questions would you have for Mr. Daniel Goleman on behalf of your clients that are just struggling to focus, to get stuff done because they're always in a perpetually reactive state?
Daniel, one of the things is you talk about the frazzle. I've seen that with so many different business owners. They are caught up in the daily rigors of answering the phones, even if it's a sales call, but sometimes the sales calls are interrupting them from getting things done. And one of the things that we coach them to do is to spend every morning creating a to-do list, because we found of all of the top entrepreneurs, every business owner, every successful top business owner is creating a list of what needs to be done throughout the day. And so there's something that we teach our business owners. It's that the pen is for remembering and the mind is for thinking. Can you explain why it's important to keep a clear mind for critical thinking throughout the day rather than just having to store it all up in your mind at all the time?
Sure. I like the fact that you're having people make lists because that's a way of prioritizing. That tells you in the moment, is this high priority today or low priority? Do I have to do this or can I put it off or, give it to someone else? And that's really important in terms of keeping the work you do right size instead of overwhelming. And it's overwhelm that puts people in frazzle. So basically, I think that being able to focus on what really matters now and put the other aside is a way of keeping your stress from just overwhelming you.
Daniel, you are a guy who's had a lot of success in your field, and I'd like to tap into your habits in your daily routines. So, how do you spend the first 4 hours of your day typically right now? I mean, currently at this very moment, what are the first 4 hours of a typical day look like for you right now?
Oh, okay. So I get up. So I like to do mindfulness. I practice mindfulness as long as I can. I have breakfast with my wife. I write. That's my thing. I write. So I write when I'm most clear and when things come most easily. I try not to take calls or do texts or so on until lunch. That's the first 4 hours.
When you say you practice mindfulness, can you walk the listeners through what
Sure.
do you mean by that?
The most basic way to begin is, find a place where you won't be disturbed. Don't put your phone aside, close the door, no kids, no pets, whatever, just where you're alone. That alone, by the way, helps you handle things. Then look at your mind. Where's your mind? First of all, though, feel your body. What are your sensations? That's a way of becoming fully present to yourself. Then bring your attention to your breathing. And as thoughts come up, and they always do, and you notice that you're thinking, bring it back to your breath. That's the whole exercise. You want to be aware of the full in-breath, aware of the full out-breath. Your mind's going to wander. You notice a wander. Bring it back. You hear a sound, your mind wanders. Bring it back. And start with the next breath. And you do that for as long as you can. I've gotten, so I really like it. I really enjoy it. At first, you may be shocked at how crazy your mind is with different thoughts, but that's actually normal. You're just noticing it for the first time. So you have to stay with it. That's what's called mindfulness.
How long do you do this mindfulness routine? Is it an hour? Is it minutes? How long are we doing here?
Well, it depends what you have. If I've got a meeting early in the morning, I might get up a little earlier, do 10 minutes, half hour. If I have a day, I actually do full days of this if I have the option. But that's not as often as I'd like. But I find that it keeps me pretty calm and pretty focused the rest of the day.
I can tell the listeners, on a perfect day, if I could, I would spend my entire day just doing that kind of thing. I really enjoy solitude, working on things. I enjoy that. And I also like being in the company of people who I share their values and their mindset. I enjoy that. And one of the things that had me most excited to have you on the show is you're like this wealth of knowledge. You have all these books, all these great things you've taught over the years. But if you were given one billboard that was the biggest billboard in the history of the world, this billboard was massive. And it was like it showed up on everyone's Facebook. It showed up on YouTube. Everybody would see this message. Is there a certain message that you would convey? And there's no limit to the number of characters you can put on it. But is there a certain message right now that you would most passionately want to communicate to our hundreds of thousands of listeners?
Pay attention.
Pay attention.
That's it.
We are paying attention. What would you say?
Be present.
We're paying attention.
Pay attention.
That was it. Pay attention to the needs of people around you. Pay attention to your own internal state. Pay attention to the person in front of you. Pay attention.
Daniel, if somebody's out there and they're wanting to look into a Daniel Goleman book, they say, you know what, I loved what I heard. I want to learn more. You've written so much. There's so many resources you've put out there. Is there a specific book that you would recommend for all of our listeners to pick up?
Well, my most recent book, it goes into each of those abilities of emotional intelligence I told you about. It's a set of primers. It's called Building Blocks of Emotional Intelligence. And it's available online from Keystep Media. And I think that if you want to really understand emotional intelligence, that's the place to start.
Now, Marshall and Z, we have time for one more question. And so, Z, I'm going to let you go first there. Final question for Daniel Goleman, the leading psychologist, arguably on the planet Earth, at least that I know about. This guy is a living legend. We've been chasing you around for a long time. I'm so honored to have you on the show today. Z, what is your final question for Mr. Daniel? Finally caught him.
Daniel, if you could go back in time, say 20 years, get into the DeLorean, go back in time and sit down with yourself 20 years ago. Self. What advice would you give to yourself?
Well, over the last 20 years, things have turned out pretty fruitfully. But I actually would tell myself to spend more time with my kids.
Wow. Okay. Good word. That's a good word. How old are your children now?
Well, now they have kids themselves, so spend time with your grandkids.
There you go. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Now, Marshall, you're a big Daniel Goleman fan. You read his work. You quote it often. What question do you have for the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Daniel Goleman?
One of the things that's big for us up here is ongoing education and the growth mindset, Daniel. And so I was hoping that you might be able to speak to the connection between the growth mindset and having emotional intelligence.
Sure.
and how that plays a role in business.
Growth mindset is very important. Carol Dweck, of course, at Stanford is promoting the concept. I talked about it for years and years under the rubric of positive outlook, seeing the possibilities in people, the possibilities in events. And basically what it means is not dismissing things, not being a naysayer, but being open to what can happen, being open to how people can develop. They can get further strengths. It's not just dismissing them as they are. Or you yourself, you can grow your business, you can grow your life, you can expand. In other words, the world is full of potential if we pursue it.
That's good. That's
real good.
Zig,
good.
This whole thing is good. The only way we can really put a cherry on top of this kind of interview, Z, we like to end every show with a boom.
A boom.
Which technically speaking stands for big, overwhelming, optimistic momentum, Mr. Goleman. That's what we believe all of our listeners need to have success. And so, Marshall, can we kind of role play the boom real quick here?
Okay, let's role play.
3, 2, 1, and
boom.
Okay, Daniel, are you ready to bring the boom?
Let's see.
Okay, here we go. Z, are you ready to bring the boom?
Absolutely.
Marshall, are you ready?
100%.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1, boom.
There's different ways of being smart. One is how smart you are in terms of school, but the other is emotional intelligence, how you handle yourself, how you handle your relationships. Good news, it's learned and learnable.
If you are like most humans that I know, when you see two gas stations and one sells gas for a little bit less and they're next to each other, you might go for the one that sells gas for less money. It makes sense. Every little bit can help.
I don't really agree with that. I like to spend as much money as I possibly can on fossil fuels. It's just something I'm into,
But here's what's weird, though. Sometimes we save a few pennies here and there and ignore opportunities to save huge money. I'm talking about life-changing money. If you switch today, as an example, to MediShare for your health care, it could be a massive savings for you and your family. The typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. I repeat, $500 a month. I have a quick question. So when you said you could save like $500 a month, are you talking about actually being able to save $500 a month? Yes, that's why I said the number. You could actually save $500 a month. Just think about that for a second. What would you do with all that extra money? Thrivers, you could be buying a flat screen every single month. That's 12 flat screens a year, $6,000 per year, or 12 flat screens per year.
Well, I have been trying to save up for 12 flat screens, and this seems to be the most reasonable, prudent way to do it.
And yes, people love it. They love it because it works. It's believers who share each other's healthcare costs. And now with over 400,000 people, aka members of MediShare, again, with over 400,000 members, there's proof it works. And it's growing like crazy. It would be like having a 7-foot-tall third grader in your family. It's like growing like a weed. It is taking off. Find out how much you can save and why MediShare is so popular. Go to medishare.com/clay. That's MediShare, MEDI share.com/clay, or call them at 844-25-SHARE for more info. That's 844-25-SHARE. Excuse me. I'd like to see if you could repeat the number one more time, but in the form of a rap song, because I find that I can typically remember numbers better if it's in a form of a rhyme. When something rhymes, I remember. Help me remember the number. Here we go. It's the MediShare rap. It's the MediShare rap. It's the MediShare rap. Here we go. 844-25 and share. That's 844-25 and share. Everybody now, 844-25 and share. Come on. 844-25 and share. If you want to save $500 a month, here's something, a little hunch. MediShare for everyone. MediShare for everyone? 844-25-SHARE. Call the number because they care. Save money everywhere. 844-25-SHARE. Make a MediShare. Make a MediShare. Thank you. I now officially remember the number 844-25-SHARE.